Hello and welcome once again to another episode of 177 Nations of Tasmania podcast. There could be few more contrasting places than Singapore and Tasmania. One, a densely packed, busy city-state near the equator. The other, a large island state with a small population, a relaxed lifestyle and ever-changing weather. Yet for Joanna, a Singapore native, Tasmania has provided some unexpected opportunities. Joanna is an environmental gerontologist who specialises in designing more inclusive spaces for the elderly. She originally came to Tasmania on holiday and unexpectedly met a man she decided she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. After studying nursing in Tasmania, she gained experience in aged care, an experience which would provide very insightful when she returned later to Singapore to take up a project manager position in aged care. She now works at the Wicking Centre in Hobart, a centre which specialises in research into dementia.
I was born in Singapore and I spent 24 years of my life in Singapore before coming over to Tassie.
And what was your childhood in Singapore like? I imagine it's very different from here.
It was interesting, very, very different. I came from a really big family, very close family. So it was always very busy. There was a lot of things to do over the weekend. And Singapore, it's a very dense, high density country. So it's a city state and it can get very busy, very bustling, lots of people. Things open 24/7. If you want to grab a meal at 11 o'clock at night, Dad just drives everybody out to have noodles or something or yum chow or something. Like in the evenings and stuff. So it's quite different.
And so does that mean that you said you're a big family, so does that mean your family is all pretty close by?
Yes and no. I think because Singapore is quite a small country, everything appears quite close. Like it only takes 5 minutes to drive from here to an uncle's place or an aunt's place sort of thing. Growing up, my dad actually ran a martial arts school. I spend most of my evenings and the weekends at his gym, either teaching or training or helping out. He's still teaching Hapkido and Taekwondo. So that's pretty much most of my weekends as a child all the way into my young adult life. So lots of teaching and training and stuff like that. It was pretty fun because it's a pretty big gym. And there were a lot of kids around my age, so we all grew up together, very close.
And so did you have a pretty close family growing up?
Yeah, well, pretty much caught up. There was something to do every weekend, like somebody's birthday, somebody got married, some kids born, that sort of stuff. Or there's, like a Mid-Autumn festival. And Lunar New Year's always super busy. So pretty nice and close and, very busy family.
What was school like in Singapore?
It's pretty intense. I remember we basically spent all our time, if not doing anything else, studying. I remember it's quite strange because when you go to like a fast food place like Hungry Jack's or Mac's, people actually eat meals. But if you go to Singapore, sometimes, or a lot of times when you pop into McDonald's and stuff like that, you might see a whole bunch of students studying, and that's quite a common sight. So it's quite different, the education system. There's a lot of emphasis on education, on grades, and how well kids do in school. It's a bit of a rat race. I think my parents were traditional in a sense, so it's different in terms of opportunity. I think they were quite happy if, I got some level of education and had a job. As usual, their ideal situation is everybody is a lawyer, doctor, or that sort of stuff. But they weren't. That was their ideal situation, but they weren't really pushing education as much.
And what did your parents do actually?
My mom, she used to work. She was kind of like a tradie, which was a bit different for Singapore. Like she worked doing signages, so huge signboards and things like that. She made like name tags and those signboards that you see at food courts or shops and things like that. So quite a different sort of career. and then she worked from home as well. So again, quite different. So I think she did that for more than 2 decades. Yeah, my dad, he ran a martial arts school and still does. So yes.
So not necessarily conventional occupations.
Yes,
I guess.
very unconventional. So yes.
When you were at school, did you have any aspirations or ambitions about what you might do in the future?
Nah, not really. I think I was one of those kids that kind of milled around and stuff. Like, just pretty relaxed. Just went with the flow. Like, if everybody's studying and stuff, I just like went along and yeah, kind of thing.
And so you ended up studying design, was that?
A lot of things were, I guess, a bit of a series of fortunate events, perhaps. So I got into a mass communication diploma course when I was studying in Singapore after high school, and then there was some design component, and I ended up doing a placement in advertising, call it a hot house or something. So I was working in this advertising sort of business for a while, and then that kind of gave me a bit of a job as I did my degree as well, which was in psychology, which was something totally different. So yeah.
And what sort of drew you into that area, or was it just purely just sort of a happy coincidence?
Oh, I think it was a happy coincidence. Yeah. And then same with the degree as well. I thought I always wanted to do something or have a career that maybe I could give back to society. That was something that I guess, I don't know, growing up, perhaps the whole being involved in martial arts and things like that. Yeah, there's a bit of, you want to do something good for society or, help make the world a better place in that sense.
And was there anyone growing up that sort of influenced you, maybe the way you think and that sort of thing?
I think there were a lot of different people that perhaps I may draw inspiration from or direction from at different points of life, I guess. So yeah, it's hard to actually nail down a single source. But I do know, like the current work that I do in dementia, a lot of it is actually drawn from my family and from my great-grandmother. She had dementia and she lived next door to us. So yeah, and she had quite a huge change in her environment. And I was, I guess, in my teenage years when that happened, and kind of a lot of lived experience and understanding from just caring for her and trying to help her during this situation as well. So yeah, so I think that she may be one of the key people that have definitely given me that drive and that motivation for moving into the dementia space. So I did mass communication, like a diploma in Singapore, and part of the placement was at an ad agency. And then when I did my placement, they realized that I was quite good at software, different design softwares, and I guess I wasn't really expensive to afford, being really young, inexperienced. So I got into design then, had a lot of. It was good because it was hands-on experience and just learning from the fellow designers, professional designers in the agency, and so did that for quite a few years and was in different design, or was an advertising agency, and then went to join a design agency.
It's interesting because most people you'd think that from jumping from design to aged care is quite a big jump, but you seem to have combined them in a certain way.
Yeah, and I think it definitely helps with the work that I do. And I guess growing up, because I had with a huge family and living together with a lot of older adults as well, I think for me moving to aged care was almost like a no-brainer for me. And then because I did like a degree in psychology, and I thought, like if I was coming down to Australia, if I wanted to study something, what would be meaningful to me, as like a life skill. So I took up the enrolled nursing course here, to kind of dip my toe into nursing to see how I go, and also got a position as a personal care assistant.
And the research you do here, does that also apply to Singapore?
Yeah, so I do. My research is local and international as well. So, like here right now, I'm in a research group called the Venture Out Research Group. So, we currently are looking at nature connectedness and how to, basically connect people living with dementia with nature. So that's what I do here in Tassie. And then on an international, I guess, side of things, I work with researchers from like Germany, Japan, in the States, and we look at what are the differences in culture and design within residential aged care, and look at, I guess, the facilitators and barriers for people going into residential aged care, as well as like evaluation tools and things like that, and how to assess different environments. So I worked as an enrolled nurse in an aged care facility. So yeah.
And what was that experience like for you?
Oh, it was very different because I guess coming from Singapore, growing up, like the schema or our idea of a residential aged care facility was really, really different. So it was a real eye-opener for me to see the differences in the facilities here. Like people are a lot more enabled, a lot more independent. The environments, there's still a lot of issues within the sector, but coming from Singapore, where the rooms themselves were still Florence Nightingale style beds, you got like 16 beds in a room, that sort of thing. And then coming here, it was where people had their own single rooms. It was just so different. So very insightful.
So in Singapore, how would the elderly be typically looked after?
So usually I think aging in place is quite a huge factor, and filial piety and aging in place, basically. So a lot of people age in the community, and so there's less of it's not looked well upon if somebody goes to a residential aged care facility if you're a family. And there's a lot of feelings of abandonment and that sort of thing tied to residential aged care facilities in a lot of, not just in Singapore, but a lot of different Asian countries because of the values. So
because I know that traditionally families are expected to look after their elderly parents.
That's right.
or whatever that's looked at. But I imagine somewhere like Singapore that's becoming more and more difficult.
I guess currently there's been a lot of changes since I started, and now you can actually you can hire help that stays at home with the person 24/7 sort of thing. So with the extra, like a person to help in the home, a lot of people can kind of age in place in that sense. So families can still kind of have their mom or dad at home, and then they have like a hired help at home.
So is that more usual than going to a care home, for example?
Yeah, so care home usually is the last resort, but it's also usually a place where people that have no family perhaps to care for them, or you may have quite severe, maybe like the care partners are really burnt out, and possibly they need some intervention that can't be introduced at home. I did my degree in Singapore, so I did a psychology degree. Yeah, and then I came to Tassie after that.
And what was it that brought you to Tasmania?
It was a holiday actually, because I was doing design work, and I was in design for a few years, just graphic design and things, and I think I was getting a little bit burnt out. And a friend of mine, he was an architect, and he said, "You got to go to Tassie for a holiday, or you need to go to Australia for a holiday." I said, "Sure." And he said, Tassie's really cool. You need to go to Tassie and have a look. I said, all right, sounds great. And he said he built a bus stop up in Launceston near Pizza Hut. And I'm like, all right. And he said, you got to go have a look. But I ended up coming to Hobart instead. So it's, again, another strange series of events. So yes, I came down to Hobart, and he had a friend, who is my husband now. So he arranged for my husband to kind of, just show me around Hobart. That's how I kind of landed in Tassie and met my husband, and then, moved down after that. We had a good connection and stuff. Yeah, and here I am.
So your now husband, was he the sort of first person that showed you around Hobart?
Yeah. So it was really, kind of just saw him in the airport because I didn't know anybody in Hobart. And so this friend of mine this architect in Singapore was like, they can show you around and stuff. Because I was like, I don't really know where to go. And Tassie's quite different from Singapore, or Hobart's quite different from Singapore. It's like chalk and cheese.
And what did he show you? Do you remember?
Oh, we drove around. He drove me to Freycinet. Yeah, so we had a look at Wineglass Bay. Of course, that's a winner. It's gorgeous. Like, there's nothing like this back home. So I was, pretty blown away by just how beautiful Wineglass Bay was. Yeah, and just around Hobart and things like that. So it was pretty cool. Even crashed his birthday party as well because it was like the week of his birthday.
Okay.
So it was pretty interesting. Very different, the birthday parties here. So yes.
What struck you as being different about it?
I guess growing up in Singapore, birthday parties, like when you're in your 20s and stuff, everybody goes out. So it was a house party. So it's very different from, you don't usually have house parties in Singapore because most people live with their parents. So it was different, interesting. It was very fun.
And what made you sort of continue to see each other after that?
Oh, I guess with the long drives and stuff, like, because, up Wineglass Bay, I think it was like, we drove for 3 hours and stuff like that and back, and there was a lot of talking. So we talked a lot, and we found that we had a lot of values, strangely, despite, how far away from each other we're from. We had a lot of values in common, a lot of things in life that we wanted, which were, a lot of shared values. And I think that connected us and kept us connected for so long as well. It was really, really lucky.
What was an example of something that you felt was a shared or common value?
First, I guess initially it was like the basic things in life. Like we definitely, we both wanted families and stuff like that. And we were very keen about having strong family values and supporting each other. He was also very supportive of me, for example, like working and things like that. Which was quite different from a lot of people that I've met previously. Like some of the people that I've met previously that I went out with had more traditional values. Like they, there's less of that shared responsibilities and things like that. He was also very supportive in me pursuing my goals and things that I want in life, which was also a little bit different because traditionally a lot of people I go out with, they, families first, which is important.
And so what did you do after that? I mean, how long did you stay in Tasmania?
We tried the whole long distance thing for a bit, but it was really rough. Like, it was just a bit tricky. He did save up and then come down to Singapore to meet my parents and stuff, and then hung out for a couple of weeks. And then, we thought, we should give this relationship a shot. So I moved down, had some savings, moved down. Yeah, and then I did a nursing degree, like a enrolled nursing kind of, not degree, sorry, Cert 4 at TAFE, and then and worked as a personal care assistant here as well in aged care.
Okay, so you got some hands-on experience of the aged care sector in Tasmania. But I'm just interested to know, when your parents met him, what were they doing? Or did they share what their impressions were? I mean, how did that go?
Oh, they were pretty all right. Like, I think Dad was a bit, like, I think he wasn't sure. He's a bit unsure what's happening. Mom was all right. She was pretty cool. She was quite happy for me that I found somebody really nice and stuff. They thought that he would be really, like, we had a good match because he was really supportive of the things that are, perhaps that would like to do and stuff like that. Yeah, and opportunities, I guess, that I wanted to get into.
And you mentioned to me on the phone that he seemed to have a quite contrasting family background to yours.
He's got a much smaller family. So it's just Mom and his sister. So quite chalk and cheese. Like mine's a bit of a, it's a bit of a village. Yeah, we've got heaps of, I think I've got 16 cousins on one side, and that's just, I think, maternal side. And they've all got kids now as well. So it's a huge, huge family.
And does sort of everybody stay in touch or?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so like usually Lunar New Year, it's really huge and festive. We used to cook for so many people. I think it will be like at least 100 people or something that come through our door, because my parents do an open house. So they've got all my relatives. They'll have scheduled times to come. And then students from his martial arts school. And then they've got friends as well. So it's really busy. I did postgraduate studies in counseling in UTAS, and then I went home. I went back to Singapore and was looking for work. And strange enough, because my husband, he said, we should move back to Singapore, and or I should move back to Singapore and just kind of live there for a bit and see how we go. So we moved back to Singapore, and he saw an ad in the papers for like it's like a program manager position to set up dementia services and things like that. So I applied for it and got the position. And it was just, again, yes, life is full of interesting events that happen. Yeah, and he just randomly saw it in the papers, just like flipping through the papers on a Sunday morning or something. And I think I was out and came back and he was like, look at this. And he was like, oh, you should apply for this. This looks right up your alley. So I did that. And then I think for another 2 and a bit years while we were in Singapore, I worked developing services for people living with dementia. It was a lot of pioneering work because I think when I went back, this was going back maybe 13, 14 years ago, there were almost no services for people living with dementia. So like we came up with a lot of programs, like a counseling program for care partners and people living with dementia. We set up like a service that helped people that were experiencing, that had responsive behaviors. And then we had another program that was more of an educational, like a public awareness, screening sort of program for people living in the community, and then just educating people about dementia, brain health, that sort of thing.
And you'd brought some of the knowledge, you'd gained some of the knowledge from being in Tasmania that helped you.
Oh, yes.
In Singapore.
So it was really interesting because having that, I guess, working as a personal care assistant and an enrolled nurse, it gives you a really intimate knowledge. Just the day-to-day living for a lot of people living with dementia. And it was within the residential aged care facility, but it just really gives you insight into, I guess, things that enable people, but also some of the barriers that people faced. And a lot of residents also shared their stories about why and how they moved in, especially when we have new residents that come in. You have a chat with people and stuff, and they share their stories with you. So having the earlier lived experience of dementia, and then now with a wider population of people sharing their experiences with me, and also spending a lot of time with people as well, that really gave me quite a lot of just a real understanding of what's happening and how I can help, and perhaps a lot of what are the gaps that I can fill as well.
And what would you say would have been some of the key things that you learned from your experience here?
I think having knowledge is actually really, really important. There's a lot of, I guess, myths about dementia, like dementia's normal aging and that sort of thing. Like there's a lot of that going around, and people may not seek help earlier because, a lot of people fob it off and go, it's not a big thing, or it's also taboo to talk about it. So there's a lot of stigma behind it, and understanding, the importance of recognizing that there is this huge stigma and how we can kind of work around it, use the right language, how we can kind of introduce that sort of health literacy into the population, because you can clearly see the differences with families that have an understanding of dementia and how they support their loved ones. When I first went back to do work in dementia, I realized that the way housing is done makes a huge difference in the services that people can roll out, or governments or private organizations can roll out and reach a lot of people. And there needs to be a lot of thought in the structure of things. So for example, high density living in Singapore, I think a lot of people see high density living as a really, may not be a positive thing, but there are actually a lot of positives if high density living is actually done well. So for example, if I have a health service like a community center or something, and it's it's built under a block of flats, for example, and then you can also have a small a early learning center and a gym. You can literally have a huge intergenerational sort of community outreach sort of program going on for a whole heap of people. And their access to service is really easy because there's no transport involved. No time for travel. Everything is within reach. And so there are definitely some pros to high density living, but it needs to be done well. And it needs to be designed for the population that is going to move into these high density spaces. So we were in Singapore for a couple of years, and so we thought we'd come back because it was a very different lifestyle. And I think, especially for my husband and myself, it's quite a high, almost like a high impact sort of work environment, and it can get quite stressful. And then there's also the high density living. So I was really lucky in the sense that my husband, he really immersed himself into our Singapore culture. We got one of these, we call it HDB flat, Housing Development Board flat. So it's 80% of Singaporeans live in public housing. So we got one of these public housing flats, and he really, went, right into the whole cultural experience. We lived in one of these flats. We took the trains, public transport and everything. And it was so different for him because he spent all his life driving. And then, in Singapore, there's no drive, you can't afford a car. It's really expensive. So it was trains and buses, lots of people, lots of activities. And I think after, almost 3 years, and just the pace of things and the stress, we thought maybe we pack it up and come back to Tassie, especially if we wanted to start a family as well.
Some people have had the what they call reverse culture shock from going back to live in there after spending a few years away. They go back to their home country, and there's they call it a kind of reverse culture shock where you kind of notice the things that you never noticed before, I suppose.
Oh, for sure. When we went back, just packaging, there's a lot of plastic packaging, and that was really apparent to me. Just the lifestyle is totally different with how we want to live as well. So there's a lot of disposable items and things like that. And just the sound, there was the auditory, almost like a sensory overload when we went back, because Tassie is really quiet compared to a really bustling city. So I remember we were sitting down just at a kind of a really busy food court, and I just couldn't help, or I actually mentioned it first, and he actually said he was experiencing this as well, and it was just this overwhelming sensory experience. There was just a lot of sound, a lot of different types of beeping, chatting, all kinds of. It was quite challenging to try and filter out the different sounds because we've come from such a peaceful and calm sort of space into somewhere that's really bustling, really busy, and I think maybe perhaps we're both a bit introverted. So Tassie was definitely an ideal place for the both of us.
And when you came back, did you come back to a job, or what did you do?
Oh, I think I was still doing consulting for a bit, and then I got a position, I think a couple months later, with the Wicking Dementia Research Centre. Yeah, I'm very fortunate to be involved with, yeah.
And perhaps you can explain a bit about what the Wicking Centre does.
So the Wicking Centre, it's very multidisciplinary. So they look at research into the dementia space. So not just into care, but into prevention and into causes as well. So we have quite a dynamic group of people. Like we've got neuroscientists, we've got nurses, we've got health geographers, statisticians. So it's a real mixed bag of experts, I guess, that kind of tie the centre together and kind of help people better understand dementia.
What's your main job these days?
So I'm a lecturer at the centre, and I do research as well. I think some people call it like a balanced academic, so you do lecturing and research. So I'm an environmental gerontologist, so I basically do research into how environments, the barriers and facilitators for people living with dementia. So my focus is really in dementia, so dementia inclusive designs, that sort of thing.
And what would be an example of a dementia inclusive design?
So there are like 10 principles, 10 design principles when we look at dementia, designs for people living with dementia. So say, for example, if somebody had like a residential aged care facility or a community space, and they want to make it more dementia inclusive, there are some principles that people can have a look at. So like how you can unobtrusively reduce risk, how you can increase helpful stimulation, decrease negative stimulation, support people in their movement and engagement. So that these are just some of the few things that we look at.
When you first came here to live, what were some of the biggest things that you had to adapt to?
Oh, the cold.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, being on the equator and stuff. Yeah, like the sun rises same time every day. Weather's pretty much the same all year round, like all my life. And then I come here, I'm just like, what is this wind? What's this strange, like the sun was like down at 9 or something. And I was just like, what is going on? So it was real, like, just that sort of physical changes it was a bit far out for me. I was like, whoa, what's happening? And just getting used to that. And I was pretty lucky. My husband, like, he gave me all his electric blanket and everything because when we first met, like, we were just kids, we were like staying at this pretty rundown place. Like, I think it was not much, maybe $70 a week or something, down at West Hobart. So, and he had mushrooms growing in the toilets and stuff like that.
Okay.
It was, very moldy. So getting used to that, like, it's very different, like, because Singapore is really clean and stuff like that. And then, we're living in this house that was just, like, falling apart pretty much. But, yeah, it was good. Like, it was fun, despite the differences. I think Tassie actually had provided me with a lot of opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot less challenges and a lot more opportunities. Like, since I've come back, I could, find the time to actually do a PhD and study and do all the things that I love. And also I felt that was really good for our relationship, because I think in Singapore it's really busy. And we're really busy, like, just working and doing a lot of stuff, but not a lot of meaningful stuff for us. So coming back here, there's more time for each other, more time for even personal growth, that sort of thing. So
would you say that it's easier to maintain a work-life balance here than in Singapore?
Definitely. I definitely do feel that way, at least for myself. And also just the conversations and stuff that you have with people, because if you see people, I guess, in the like big groups all the time, you kind of make a lot of small talk. May not be very, like, it's just a lot of small talk, and then really short small talks to a lot of different people, so you don't really have that sit down, just have a coffee with somebody and actually find out about them.
And I guess, if you have a busy, stressful life, ideally you need some time to debrief and talk to people. But if you're constantly busy, it's very difficult. And just, that's how people get burnt out, I guess. You've got is it 2 kids?
Yes.
And how old are they?
2 and 7. Oh, actually, no, 3. One, my youngest is he will be 3 this year, and the other 7.
Okay, so the 7-year-old is at school?
Yes.
And I guess the schools that you experienced in Singapore will be very different to Tasmanian.
Oh, it's that's a huge difference. And I'm really amazed by his classrooms and his teachers here. Like when I was in school, it's just, I think we had almost 40 kids in a class, just desk chairs, that sort of thing. You sit down, you go to school, and you get lots of textbooks. I remember just heaps of textbooks, heaps of homework, teachers talking at you, take lots of notes, that sort of thing. But for him, like it's really interactive, and you really understand what you're learning. Because I realized that growing up, the education, you learn a lot, but you don't actually interact with it or engage with the knowledge. So, we learn about, say, light or something from our textbooks and stuff. But that's just that. You just read about it, you take some notes off a chalkboard, and that's it. And then you do, your quizzes and your tests and stuff like that. You regurgitate the knowledge, but you don't actually really do anything else with it, especially at a young age. Whereas, like for him, like they had a thing about light, and the teachers set up all these wonderful things like light boxes and just all these different things that kids can actually understand, like refraction and reflection and all these things that they can actually do to kind of get really hands-on and understand, not just understand about light, but understand how it works and actually be immersed in it and really engage in it. So they have a clear understanding and not just a textbook understanding of how it works.